I'm in undergrad, sitting in an interfaith class at UCLA entitled Abrahamic Faiths. One day, the instructor splits us into small groups, each with Muslims, Jews, and Christians, and our job is to read out loud some of our core texts. So there I was, reading the story of Abraham, kicking his son Ishmael out into the wilderness. And by the way, Ishmael is the progenitor of Islam. So I'm made to read this line out loud. Why did Abraham kick out Ishmael? Our Torah says, because he was a wild ass of a man. Ew. I was embarrassed. How would they respond? Until that point, I never really even thought about it at all. I'd heard, I'd read, I'd even discussed these stories of our ancestors, but all of a sudden it hit me. This story is harsh. And I didn't know what to do. Class ended, but I was rattled. I was intrigued. What else happens here? So I kept reading, and over I was stunned. He did what? Wait a second. Again? This guy, our forefather, he did that? With each word and each story, my gut sunk further and further. These guys we laud, we hold up, are deeply flawed. It doesn't seem like a story about people worth revering. They're just so human. Stick around for the sermon. I'll say a bit more about how this unfolded and how I make sense of all that today. What if I told you that the person you were supposed to revere sold his wife not once, but twice? Stole and swindled, deceived and exploited his way to his position. They're trickster, deceitful, willing to lie to a blind man on his deathbed in order to get what they wanted. Jacob, our forefather, he's the one who extorted his brother, who deceived a blind man. And Abraham sold his wife Sarah not once but twice, saying, "She's my sister." These are the stories I encountered anew in that interfaith class at UCLA. What a shock. These are the people I'm supposed to pray as a Jew 3 times a day on account of? Look at what they did. I'm not making these things up. It's in our Torah, our Bible. And just look. This is what our historic record preserves. And yet, somehow, some way, we as the Jewish people have decided that despite all that, they are worth revering. I went home from that UCLA class and I was horrified. And as I kept reading, it kept getting worse. I went to my savta, my grandma, and I asked her, "Have you seen this? These are not, in my eyes, people worth revering. What's up with this story? Theft, scandal, swindling, murder, adultery. We read this, we hear what they've done every single year. This is what we hold fast to. These are the people whose names we use in our prayers." And she said, "Really? Zot Torat Emet." Ariel, this is the Torah of truth. It's who we came from. It's not a whitewashed story, a cleaned up, sanitized version of history. It's a story about human beings, not angels in the sky we could never be like. It's a story about truth. Human beings, even our forefathers, make mistakes. They made mistakes. We will make mistakes. They and we can still be worth revering. So let's talk about Jacob, also called Israel. He did things that none of us would be proud of. and who, despite ragged beginnings, becomes the namesake of our people. We're not really Jews. We're Am Yisrael, the nation of Israel. We're wrestlers. Israel means to wrestle, to grapple with God. I've already told you some Jacob story, but let's go back. Let's go a little deeper. Jacob had a slightly older twin brother, Esav. Esav, his brother, was a hunter. One day his brother was hungry, famished, and after an unsuccessful hunt came home to find Jacob cooking a stew. Please, he asked, feed me of that stew. And he said, yeah, I'll give you some stew, but first, what will you give me in exchange? Would you give me your inheritance claim as the firstborn? Would you trade that for the soup? He extorted his brother. I know I've been hungry before. I don't know what I would give if I was starved at that moment. At that moment, what's a birthright? Back in those days, birthright of the firstborn, that entitled you to land claims, to property, to inheritance. And this is what Jacob did to his brother. Instead of doing the right thing, of feeding his older twin brother who's hungry, he extorts him. Later, as their blind father, Isaac, lays on his deathbed, Isaac asks Esav, for my dying wish, I want to bless you, so please go get me a final meal. Please go hunt the game I so love. He wanted his eldest son to go hunt for his favorite. So what did Jacob do? While Esav is out on the hunt to serve his dying father's wishes, Jacob and his mother colluded. They did something unthinkable. They dressed Jacob up in his brother's clothes. They strapped sheepskin on his arms to mimic Esav's hairy arms. They quickly cooked up a meal to taste like the dish his father had requested. And he stole his brother's blessing by lying to a blind, dying man. And this is the man. This is the human being we are to look to respect, and to revere. By now, you're all writing letters to the president demanding my resignation. And if that's so, I understand. Hey, my son's name is Jacob. My Zeta's name is Jacob. My name is Jacob. Send that guy back to California. But before you hit send, first let me get to the end so you can hear where I end up with this. Let me tell you what it is about this man I think does make him worthy of our adoration, despite all that. Let's look at the moment Jacob merits to become Israel, becoming worthy of becoming our people's namesake. 20 years after stealing his brother's blessings and running away, not like a thief in the night, but actually a thief in the night, he's come home with a ganze mishpacha, huge family in tow. And now, the night before meeting his brother for the first time in 20 years, he spends the night alone. Not because he wants to introspect, because he's afraid. He splits the family into camps across the river, lest his brother exact revenge on him. At least, he thinks, if my brother comes to get me, the family will have a chance to run away, not to become collateral damage. He knew his brother had every right to be upset. More than upset, he knew what he did. Esav would be within his right to hunt Jacob down like the scoundrel he was, and take back what was stolen from him, his birthright and blessing. That night, Jacob was alone and scared. He wrestled. And when you read the text, it's very, very unclear what happened that night. Who is Jacob wrestling with, if anyone at all? Is it God? Is it an angel? Is it just himself? That night, something happened that was nothing short of miraculous. It's what makes Jacob worth being a namesake. He knew he did horrible things. The Torah doesn't even try to cover up and hide what he did. But in that night, before meeting with his brother, he says to the phantasm or God or himself or whatever, I won't let go. I won't let go until you bless me. I will not let go of the truth of what I've done, not until those truths become a blessing, a source of blessing. I will not shy away from the man in the mirror until I'm able to see those moments, what those moments were meant to teach me. I will not let go. That's what it means to be Yisrael. Yisrael means one who wrestles with God, wrestles with the things we've done that we are not proud of. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, teaches what makes Jacob worthy of the name Yisrael, worthy of being a forefather, is that in that moment, in wrestling with the angel, in wrestling with himself, he stood and took full responsibility for his past. He took responsibility for what he did, for the implications and the impact, for the years of pain they caused. And he was unwilling to let the shame and the darkness he had futilely tried to literally outrun to be what would determine all of his future actions and legacy. He knew what he had done, and he knew who he was. He's of divine origin, just like you and me. Paradoxically, to move forward with his life, he had to reckon with how he had acted in his past, taking responsibility for the impact, to wake up, and to own who he is and what he'd done. In the Baal Shem Tov's words, to uplift every opportunity, every blunder in his life as a source of blessing. Yom Kippur is that opportunity. It's not a moment to flog ourselves. It's a moment to look in the mirror and see what we've done, what we've said that we are not proud of. Yes, we may have done and said those things, but that doesn't change who we are. That's how we rise beyond and above ourselves. But there's a price. You have to take responsibility. You have to apologize. You have to recognize and reckon with what you've done, like Jacob did that night. Because if you don't, you'll be buried by it. And it's in looking at it and recognizing it and owning it that we can then move forward from it. It's what allows you to become Yisrael. That's what makes us the wrestlers of God. It's standing and facing it, being unwilling to move forward another inch until it becomes a blessing. That's done by doing what you're already doing here today. Showing up, taking responsibility, apologizing where appropriate, and learning new tools to deal with our family dynamics, new tools for breaking free of our past hurts and traumas, figuring out what led us to those mistakes in the first place so we don't accidentally fall back down those paths. Today is our peak Jewish opportunity to do this work. But it's not only today, it's also for the rest of our lives. It's in wrestling with our divinity. It's in recognizing we have made mistakes and apologizing quickly. I'm proud of Jacob. He taught us with his life. It's not about being flawless. It's about owning our stuff. And when we look at our mistakes and failures as learning tools, as blessings, we understand we are children of God. We are the product of this universe. And our ripple effect on this world through our actions and words can be a legacy for 1,000 generations. So let's be like Jacob. Let's learn from this life. Let's learn from our flaws. Let's use those to become worthy of being written into the book, worthy of the name Israel. And in that way, becoming a blessings for generations to come, flaws and all. Thank you.